story. My story. Our story. This podcast is untold stories being told. What's really going on? How you really feel? Untold stories. Hi, welcome back to Untold Stories. This is me, and I have a very special guest on today. He's an extraordinary man, a handsome man, a wonderful man. He's my papa. He's my father. He's my daddy. It's my daddy. Welcome, Daddy. Please introduce yourself to my listeners.
Okay, well, I'm Tafiq Colbert. I'm not his dad. And I live here in Georgia, right outside of Atlanta, originally from Philadelphia.
Where are you from?
I'm originally from Philadelphia.
What part of Philadelphia?
Norf Philadelphia. I was born and raised in Norf Philly.
I love Norf Philly.
Kind of moved around different areas of Philadelphia.
You said where?
I said I kind of moved around in different areas of Philadelphia, Germantown, West Oak Lane, places like that.
Yeah, but your roots are from North Philadelphia.
Right.
What parts by chance?
Well, I was born. I'll start where I was born. I was born on.
Born by the river.
Yeah, well, it was pretty close to the river. Too far from the river. I was born on 15th and Susquehanna Avenue. I was born over there, and on 15th on Susquehanna Avenue, and when I was about 3, we moved to on the other side of town, which would be 11th and Norris Project. So
they call that Crosstown, right?
Huh?
They call that Crosstown
from where I was born.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I grew up in the project. By growing up in the project, I grew up around a lot of people. So many I can't even count. So that taught me to be a little social.
A little social? You just a little social, Dad?
Some people say a little too social, or more social than most people.
You said too social?
Well, not too social. Well, I grew up around a lot of people, and growing up around a lot of people, you had a lot of peer pressure, I should say, coming from all different directions. And I grew up knowing a lot of different people, different kinds of people. I knew some nerds, I knew gang members, I knew drug dealers, I knew hustlers, I knew pimps, I knew, you name it, I knew them. And I knew them personally. You know.
Okay. Yeah, I know you know personally.
Well,
so what is like an interesting fact? Oh, an interesting fact about where my father is from. Wasn't one of the Three Stooges from your area, or had a store?
Well, I went to a school named Ferguson Elementary School, and on the way to school, one of the candy stores that we would stop at, Shemp of the Three Stooges actually worked in that store. So I saw him from time to time. So I wouldn't say that I don't know whether they owned the store or not, but I know Shemp actually worked in that store that we would visit on our way to school, to and from the school. Yeah,
cool. And I know you love the Three Stooges because we used to watch it all the time.
Oh yeah, yes. Mo, Larry, and Curly. Also, I had the pleasure of finding, this was later on in life, a few years ago, I found out where Larry actually was born on South Street in Philadelphia.
Yeah, because they had that restaurant that used to be open there. They was commemorated to him or dedicated or.
Yeah, he actually lived in that house. It was a house at the time, but now it's a restaurant. So,
yeah, interesting.
That's an interesting tidbit.
Yeah. So you were born by a river. Now you're born on 15th and Susquehanna. That's what we call it. We call it Susquehanna. Susquehanna Avenue. You moved across town to North Street Projects. You lived in a building at once, where on North Street used to be a building there. It's no longer there. But you lived in a building, right?
Yeah, we lived in a high-rise building. And at the time, it's so funny, at the time, you know, the high-rise building, I thought I was a rich kid, you know, growing up, a rich child.
Oh, you thought you was the Jeffersons? Like, you know, moved
I
on.
thought, you know, I thought I was rich because, well, not knowing where our little bit of money we had came from, we just had it. And at that time, I had one suit of clothes, I remember, and my mother would send me outside to play. And at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, we would come in the house, take a nap. My mother would wash our clothes. We would take a bath, put the same clothes back on. She would wash and iron them, and we would go back outside to play the rest of the day. This was in the summer when we didn't have school.
You had to stay clean. We were very clean.
That was one of the things that I mean, like I said, we took 2 baths a day. We took one in the afternoon.
That's how it was in the summer. My grandma was the same way. She would make me come in at night, which is the afternoon. She'd be like, "Could you get the heat stroke?" We had to cut all the lights out. Everything was off, and you had to lay on the floor, or you lay down and you fell asleep. And then when you woke up, you be able to go outside and play again. But you had to wash up. Right. You couldn't be nasty and sticky and smelling like outside.
Oh no, they took our parents took a lot of pride in us being clean. That's why I guess in a way that's why I didn't know we were poor, because I related. They show
we're dirty.
Show poor as a person that's dirty and nasty or whatever, and we were never like that. As a matter of fact, nobody in our neighborhood was that way. We had one person in our neighborhood that was kind of like that, and his name was Norman. I'll never forget. And we would tease him because his mother would keep him so lousy. I mean, he was bad. You could smell him and everything. And the whole neighborhood would tease him about that.
Yeah.
So, you know, we was just used to, and people in the neighborhood, their parents, they were one parent families. All of us were one parent family. And I remember a lot of my friends, their mother would dress them to the nines. I mean, they would. My mother couldn't, of course. She had 4 children at the time, and she was a single parent because my father, he was in prison at the time.
We'll talk about that in a few, because that's a very interesting story, your relationship with your dad. But go ahead, Daddy.
Well, as a relationship, I can't say that we really had one, because I think the first time that I remember meeting my father was, I had to be somewhere around 7 or 8 years old.
Really? And you are, before you continue, Dad, if you met your dad around 7 or 8 years old, my dad is not the youngest. He's actually the 4th in the first set.
I'm the fourth.
He's the 4th in the first set of. So if he didn't see his father in 7 to 8 years, it's not as if he was the last to be born within a certain set. So he has other siblings that were there before.
Well, my mother did take us up to the prison to see him on, they would have something like a family day at the prison. And I remember sitting out on the grass, on a blanket, having a picnic with him while he was in prison.
And the prison he's speaking about, excuse me, and Dad, is the prison on Fairmount Avenue, the penitentiary that Fairmount Avenue.
Exactly. This was the prison in Fairmount Avenue. He also was at Gratis Fort. He was in several penitentiaries in his life because he would go back and forth.
I told you I got famous people. My grandfather traveled. My grandfather.
Oh yeah, he traveled. He traveled a lot.
In different places.
He was known as a paper hanger. They called him paper hangers back in the days because he would forge checks.
That's where I get it from. I don't forge checks. I'm just putting it out there, FBI and people. I don't forge checks. I have an artistic ability, as do many people.
He was ambidextrous, so he could sign his name with either his right or his left. And that's one of the things that I kind of took after him, because I can use both of my hands for different things, but not the same thing. I would play ball with my right hand, I write with my left, that kind of thing. But you know, that's what he did, and he also would stick you up. You know, he put a gun in your face and demand your money. This is what I hear. I don't know, but he was a pretty interesting person to me. The little times that I did have with him, he was an extraordinary man, because he, when he came out of prison, the first time, I believe the first time that I remember, he was Muslim and he could speak Arabic. He was teaching us Arabic. We would Fatiha in the evening and before we went to bed. You know, we prayed Islamically. I totally forgot that language. So we were kind of learning the language. He was teaching us as he went along. He was a painter. He was an artist. He was a musician. He played the trumpet. I remember sitting in a couple sessions with him and his friend. His friend played, I think he was a drummer, and he played the saxophone, and my father played the trumpet. And during that time was the first time I was exposed to any type of drugs, because my father would smoke marijuana and go in a room and play his trumpet. My mother would sit us outside and say, "Look, your father's crazy, don't go in that room." So we would never go in the room. All I remember is that smell. But he was very, very interesting. He was, I remember him, he could stand on one hand with the rest of his body in the air. He knew, and that kind of thing. And back in them days, we just thought that was something weird, you know.
Yeah, because Black people was staying away from the stuff that we are from, but it was like,
yeah, he knew that kind of stuff naturally. He would
okay,
talk
so
to
I
me.
want to know this, and I think you told me or maybe not. When he was within Islam, did he study under Noble Drew Ali, or did he study under was he Sunni, or?
I think it was Noble Drew Ali, I believe it was.
Yeah, I think you did tell me that.
Actually, it was my mother who was Muslim first.
Yes.
And she introduced him, as well as a lot of other people, to Islam. That's how I got my name, Tafiq. My oldest sister's name is Jamila. The sister under her is Salima, and over me, Fatima. My mother's name was Karima.
That's a strange name with grandma. We don't even know what her real name is anyway. It's Ida, Hazel May, Hazel, Ida.
Yeah, well, they she had a few other names
too. We don't know.
But I knew her Islamic name was Karima. She used to take me. I remember when I was real young. We would actually walk from 11th Street up to 33rd Street, where John Coltrane actually lived, and she would take me to his house. There, so she kind of knew. She knew him. She knew him. She knew Miles Davis. She was pretty interesting herself. And I remember we were between the time. I can't remember when this came about, but we lived with Naima and Khadija when Naima was with John Coltrane while he was here in Philadelphia. We had to live with them, so they were. Naima was my mother's Islamic sister, and she had a daughter named Saida.
And that Saida is my younger sister's name. And Naima, my father named my cousin after Naima.
Yeah, I named my Naya's mother's brother's daughter. I named her Naima, and I named one of my last daughter, I named her Saida.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I kind of kept them names and them people and the memory of them people with me throughout the years.
And that's interesting because you were a little boy then, and to remember that up until now, you know, when you got older.
Yeah, there were some certain things that I remember very vividly as a child. And I take it that I remember them things because they were so set from the norm of the way that we were taught Black people should live in them days.
Yeah.
I always gravitated toward differences, you know. So I kind of had that within me. I guess I got it from my father. And in a lot of ways from my mother too, you know.
Yeah, she was different too.
Yeah, and you know, and I raised my children and family different.
I.e. me. I am a result of all of that.
This one here, Naya, she kind of really took, she's a lot like myself. So, you know, she will go against the norm. You know, I'm very proud of my daughter because I'm proud of the way, she's a single mother, but I love the way she raises my grandchildren, the way that she lives, you know, and I don't want her to get a big head, but I'm very proud of her.
Keep going, just tell them more. Love it. But so we were talking about, we talked about your dad and his wonderful skills that the government just loved to capture him and be captivated by his skills, oftentimes in and out of his life. We talked about grandma. We're going to talk more about grandma in a few. I just want to finish talking about your dad a little bit more and a little bit about his family. We don't.
Well, I think if I may cut you off, I think my father, him being in and out of prison doesn't reflect the type of man he was. I really believe my father was a good man, but he had a lot of odds against him, you know.
But he also had skills, you know. If he
he had skills that he would.
If he had a different complexion,
probably would have been pretty successful had he not been a Black man. I just say that because
genius. Someone can teach themselves a language. He probably didn't go to high school. He probably didn't even go to past grade school.
Well, no, I differ with you there because
maybe he did because
his parents were very big on education.
Yeah, they were educated.
Oh, they were very educated people. That's why I know my father. He was an educated man, but he just wasn't allowed to use most of his skills.
Because my uncle was a librarian.
Was very educated. Back in them days, people were very, very a stickler about education. You know, they didn't play that. Although they weren't allowed to use a lot of their education once they were, you know, out of school, but their education was very, very important to my grandparents, which my parents, you know, people. Yeah. They were all very intelligent as far as school-wise, were very, very intelligent people.
Yeah, because Uncle David or Uncle Walt was his name. He was the librarian. He worked at the library.
Yeah, my father's youngest brother was a librarian.
Yeah.
The brother next to him, my Uncle Richard. I love my Uncle Richard because my Uncle Richard was another free spirit. He would and go, and all you would see him as every now and then. And he lived in Boston, and he died sort of mysteriously. And he owned a lot of property in Boston, but the property was turned over to the state.
Of course.
Because we didn't find out he had died for over a couple of months after he died. You know, a friend of his, or my father's, came to me and told me about it. So I never knew what really became of that. But he was a very handsome man. He was very learned also. And my father, he had two twin sisters.
Oh yeah, I remember Aunt Betty
Betty
and
and Mildred, which was also, you know, they all went to school together. My mother, I remember my mother telling me she went to school with my father's sisters.
because they were close.
Yeah,
One of them were close with grandma.
yeah, yeah. And my grandmother, she was different. She was sort of different also. I love my grandmother, but she was sort of eccentric. She was a registered nurse.
Mhm.
She kept to herself a lot. She didn't have. She was sort of a loner. Very intelligent woman. She kept her house immaculate. I mean, she was you talking about clean. This was a clean woman. I didn't meet my grandfather until later on in life, not too long ago, long before he died.
Mhm.
He seemed like to be a very nice man. I actually met my grandmother's mother, which my sister Jeanette,
Oh yeah, please tell that story. That's really interesting.
my sister Jeanette stayed in trouble. Anything
That's my eyes. My eyes is so cool. My eyes is cooler than cool. Just lock
she
your car.
stayed in trouble. She would get me in trouble a lot, but she told me she found out where our great grandmother lived. So she took me over her house, and I found out that she ran a brothel. You know, my great grandmother ran a brothel.
We come from entrepreneurs.
From where we grew up.
An entrepreneurial family. So that's
yeah. Most of my family on both sides, they weren't go out and get a job working people. They always created their own sense of.
And to just put something on top of that, we're white collar workers, not blue collars.
Oh yeah,
they trouble for anything. It's white collar crimes. We don't do it.
Pretty much they were in that sense. I never heard of them working for anybody. Now, my grandfather on my mother's side, he was another interesting man because my grandfather, we called him Granddaddy. He worked down the docks with the, you know, and a lot of Italian, what I would say Italian gangsters knew him. And he would, they called him Doc Taylor. He would walk around with a satchel full of money. And from what I understand, he because he worked the docks and would get liquor cheap, he would supply a lot of speakeasies with their liquor.
And hold on, this is during Prohibition time. This is
during Prohibition. This is before my time. This is what I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is when alcohol was illegal. So it wasn't like he can go to a liquor store. This is Prohibition time. So this is when people was bootlegging. So that's
they was bootlegging. Yeah. Also, my grandfather was the first Black vendor in Philadelphia. Because he had his connection with the Italian boys in South Philly. Because back then you would see mustard pretzel carts on the corners downtown. Well, he had a mustard pretzel cart also, but he didn't have a corner. So he would have to walk his mustard pretzels up and down the parkway. And when I would go over his house with him, and he would push his cart and would go take pretzels to people and collect the money and give it to him. And in the summertime, he had an ice cream popsicle cart, you know, with the bell on it, and he would ride the bike, and I would also do the same thing. So I learned a lot from him as far as entrepreneurship.
And he was the first Black man to be a vendor on the Parkway.
On the Parkway, yeah. They didn't allow.
Because at that time, it was just
he was the first Black vendor that I know of, even in Philadelphia. Yeah,
because at that time it was only Jewish and Polish and the Italians that were a lot, you know.
Yeah, at that time. So I mean, he was only Black vendor that I know of and that was around during that time. So, but and then I found out all of this about the docks when I got married, and I was looking for trying to find a way of making money. So I went down to the docks to hustle, and I found out, you know, from my grandfather, the people that knew my grandfather, his reputation at the docks, because he was a pretty strong man. He would pick up them cocoa beans by himself, you know, where it took, I had a hook and another guy had a hook, and it took both of us to pick up them beans. You know, he was known for his strength and his hard, he was a hard worker, but he was also an entrepreneur. I love.
And how many children did they have? He came from, would you tell us about where he came from, what the little bit of information you know about where he's from, where your my great grandmother, your grandmother's from, on your mother's side?
Well, my grandfather, the one just told you about, he was from Churaw, South Carolina. And one story about that is I remember when he passed, we went to Churaw to bury him in his hometown. And when we got to the town, the sheriff, I remember the police, the sheriff or whatever he was, he stopped us and he told us, he said, we know what you're here for. You're here for Mr. Taylor's funeral. Well, we expect you to go to the funeral, and by tomorrow night, we expect you to be out of town.
So it's like a sundown town.
And this, I mean, you talk about a racist town. We went to a restaurant, and I experienced this. I heard stories about this, but I experienced it myself, where we went in a restaurant and they refused to serve us. And I have an uncle, my grandfather's youngest son, Doc, they called him Dr.
Uncle Robert, that was my man.
Uncle Robert,
was cool.
He got upset and he almost started a ruckus in that town. And I think I had one or two of my children with me. It was either Tafiq Ibit or it was Tyrese. And I said, no, we're not gonna start anything in this town because I got my children with me and I didn't want nobody to get hurt. And
that's like when we went down south that time and they was about to lynch us out of that town.
Oh yeah, we
because they wouldn't give me clean sheets.
The other time, yeah, we went to a family reunion, was in Monk's Corner, and Naya was with us, and they had blood on the sheets with
something dirty on the sheets.
Naya complained about it, and they made it very clear that they didn't want us there, and well, we felt it, and we knew it was time for us to get out of that town.
So this is what happened. The sheets, we went out, we were at a family reunion, and we left to go see our family and do stuff. We were Geechee Gullah people. We had like a good time meeting those people and seeing people. We come back, my sheets on my bed was dirty. And I had my 1-year-old daughter with me. And it's just dirty sheets anyway. So I went to the desk, and behind the desk, you see this little thing here? That's where the sheets were, behind the person. I said, hey, my sheets are dirty. Could you give me some sheets? I don't mind changing them. He said, I can't leave to get the sheets for you. The sheets are right there. And I said, well, no, I don't need you to come and put the sheets on. I'll put them on myself. And he said, no, I can't do that. So I said, well, I can't sleep in the bed. So I ended up sleeping with my dad. Me and my daughter slept with my dad that night. The next morning, the lady said she wanted all of us out of there. And we were like, what's going on? She said, we don't want you here. We will refund your money and you can go. And then we had about what, 8 to 10 rooms?
Yeah, we had about 8 to 10 rooms.
And then the cops, she said the cops came and the cops told us, we asked to see where would it be another hotel we can stay at. They said, no, you have to leave the county now. And this was back in 2004. Yeah, racism, good old racism.
And that's what we did.
Mm-hmm. We left and went to Hilton Head.
I'll tell you another story about that town. This has happened later, back in 1984, I guess it was, 85. I had a barbershop in Norf Philly. And one of my customers one of my clients that I had came to me every week, and he worked for the city. So he decided he was going to retire from the city. Well, he would come to the barbershop with these two other guys. The other barbers would cut their hair. So they would come, all three of them would come at the same time to get their hair cut. So, you know, they became quite friendly with us. And this particular guy, I can't recall his name, he retired from the city and he went back, he wanted to go back to his hometown to live. Well, his hometown was True Raw, South Carolina. So I found that out when he went down. I said, well, where's your hometown? He said, True Raw, South Carolina. I said, oh, that's interesting. My grandfather was from that town. So in months or maybe a couple of years later, you know, I'm in the shop, we cut hair, and the two fellas that would come in with him said, we got to go down south to this guy's funeral because he had died. Like, well, what happened? They said, we don't know. We'll find out when we, you know, get down there. So when they went down, they found out that this particular person, this was in 1984, 85, was lynched. This is true story. He was lynched with barbed wire around his neck and a still stuck up his rectum.
Oh, such evil.
The family didn't want him, the people to tell what happened, but one of his family members snuck and told them actually what happened to him. So I guess he went down there with his northern ways and
well, just being. They know we not from. How am I dad gonna take a conversation when he like
hey,
that?
Hey man, could I need to call you back? I'm on a Skype.
Put it on mute. So just for a second, I had this conversation. That's what old people.
So I mean, so you know, if you want to talk about racism is alive, and this was just.
Oh, Dad, remember plenty of times when we used to go down south and we couldn't stay in hotels. We slept in the car. I remember one time when cops stopped us for no reason and how nasty they were. And I was you just did what you stood there as a man. You didn't back down or anything, but you just did you know, just the dumbest stuff.
Well, to show you another story that I've had so many experiences that I've had with my father. I remember one time my father came home from prison, and in order to get mother's assistance, which they call what is it, welfare.
It was called mother's assistance. It wasn't even called father's assistance. It was just mother's assistance, which tells you what that was for.
It was called mother's assistance. And what that meant was, in order for the state to give you money, the family money, there couldn't be a man in that family, because if there was a man there, they would stop their assistance. When my father came home, of course, my mother, you know, my mother and father hooked up, and my father moved in, which was he wasn't supposed to do. Well, the only way my mother could continue to get money and food from the state was for him not to live there. Well, I remember one day a white woman come by our house with clipboard, and they would come by periodically, believe it or not, to inspect your house. In them days, to see how you live and to see if they saw anything out of the ordinary that went against their rules.
Or new or anything, because you couldn't have anything new because they need to account for any money that you were spending, right?
Exactly. If you had anything new or anything like that, they want to know how you could afford, how could you have this. Well, I remember my father was in the bed and this lady come by the house, and my father literally had to climb out of the window. There had his shoes in his hand, he climbing out the window and putting his shoes on. Can you imagine what that did? What that did to me as the only son, watching his father flee from his house.
From some white woman.
Result from a white woman. And the woman went through, I remember her going through our cabinets and going through, and my mother very nervous, thinking, hoping that she don't find out that my father was there. And my father, they wouldn't give, back then, they wouldn't give a Black man a job.
And if you didn't have a job, you can go to jail.
So that was their way. And I realized that was their way of keeping, that's where they began to break the Black family apart.
Because if you can't get a job, and this is even goes all the way back to slavery. Soon as Black people got off the plantation, they set up a rule: if you don't have a job, then you go to jail. So can you imagine all the way back then from just getting off the plantation? So most people had to go back to the plantation because who was hiring you? But you have a record of being in prison. Your great-grandfather, great-grandfather, grandfather. So that's a history of just imprisonment, straight from being kidnapped and terrorized, then laws placed to put you in prison based off of things you can't handle or you can't do anything about. Even when I just learned there was a law passed when men went into the Korean War, and it may not have been just Korean War, it may have been the Civil War. And no, it couldn't have been Civil, it had to be the Korean, Second World War. I keep forgetting about those. They made enough money that their women didn't have to work anymore. They passed laws because white women were upset that Black women didn't have to work and could sit at home. They passed actual laws stating that Black women had to work, even though they didn't need the money for it. How evil is that? And if they didn't go to work, they will be imprisoned.
Well, throughout my lifetime, I've witnessed how the system kept our people from advancing. Now, me, I have to say this, that I don't believe anybody could stop me from advancing. I don't believe anybody could hold me back. There's elements out there that will try to do that, but unless you submit to that, it don't have no effect on it.
No, because it doesn't have any power anyway. The power is what you give it.
Right. Exactly. My father didn't have to jump out that window. Could have stopped that money. Maybe we would have had hardship and would have. However, we had a choice. And my father and my mother had a choice. They decided to do what they did, understandably. And believe me, I understand it.
Because all the money they were giving out, it was a ridiculous amount of money. It's a ridiculous amount, and they even do it now. It's a ridiculous amount of money for someone who would either make the same amount or a little bit less if they went to a job. So, and you get perks like food stamps, things that cost a lot of money, medical, things like that. That is like, hey, this is going to be difficult for me to get even close to this if I get a real job. So I will suffer either way. They put you in that
position. A lot of times you suffer more in a job than you would otherwise. But what that is, see, the thing about that is, I would rather be broke because nobody can make you poor.
No.
I would rather be broke with my eyes open and conscious of my life and conscious of what I'm doing in life than to have everything given to me and I'm lulled to sleep.
I don't want anybody to give me nothing because who are they to give me anything?
That is what makes you poor.
Yes.
That's what makes you poor. That's not how much money you got. You get poor by depending on others. When you're a dependent and you're depending on others for your livelihood, that's what makes you poor. They make
you're controlled
in the world, but mentally you are poor because you're depending on them. Nobody should, in my opinion, nobody gives me anything. I take it. I take what's mine. I mean, I don't go around taking things from people that that belongs to them. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what rightfully belongs to me. I'll take. Nobody gives it to me. I don't want you to give it to me.
Because you should earn things.
Nobody gives nobody nothing for nothing. You don't get something for nothing in this world. You pay for everything you get. I've learned that. I'm 70 years old. One of the things
you hear that, my daddy is 70 years old. Look at my 70-year-old daddy. Don't my daddy look good? My daddy's 70 years old. Look at him grinning. You like
well, you know, black don't crack. Come on, baby. You know how well, you know how we do.
Yeah, you know.
But you know, and I think that's the biggest. Like I said, the mother's assistance, all of that stuff was designed to null us to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
That we
and
don't
separate us.
Recognize our own power,
mm-hmm.
our God-given power that we have. We can overcome anything. Well, we can overcome any and everything. You know, then you know, and throughout my life, to get back to my life, I mean, I've been through the drug life, the gang war life.
All right, let's go back before we get into that. Let's go back to, we're going to start because he's 70 years old, so he has a long life. He has a lot of things he's done in his life, and we're going to get to most of it. Back to when you were a child. Let's go back to your childhood. And you mentioned gang war. You said something about the gangs. What's that thing?
Well, when coming in the project, you had every element that you would have in a village. Okay, you had women, you had men, you had very few men, but you had some men, and you had children. Well, as a young man growing up, you grow up, it's in our nature to be warriors. It's in our nature to control our area where we live. So innately, the young men, as growing up, we developed our own ecology within within our own neighborhoods. We charted out our little territory as to, this is North Street, that's Diamond Street, this is Burke Street, what have you.
And that's just before you continue there, for people who are not from Philadelphia, we don't do gangs like how they talk about gangs like on the West Coast with the Bloods, Crips, or I don't know the other gangs.
No.
We have neighborhoods here in Philadelphia. So when he's saying North Street and Diamond Street are a block away from each other. But within a 4-block radius or 8-block radius, these different neighborhoods. So going from one side to the other is a totally different neighborhood. Similar people and everything, but different neighborhoods as far as gangs and turfs.
Well, you know, they call us gangs, but you know, we were actually there. In our minds, we were protecting our neighborhood. Because
what did you say y'all used to call it? Like y'all just social clubs, right?
We had them after the gangs.
Okay.
That's a story within itself. We had the males in the neighborhood. If you were from or lived on one corner or one street or within one neighborhood, all the males would get together and call themselves, North Street. The people live around on Diamond Street would call themselves Diamond Streeters. It was ironic because I lived on Diamond Street, but I was from North Street.
Yeah.
It's just a block away. So you choice in that block, half the people within that neighborhood was from Diamond Street, the other half was from North Street.
The Oxford
and Oxford. But what we did, we had gang wars, which actually was was our way of exercising our testosterone. And we had, I called the war games, you know,
because there were rules. Explain to that, Dad. There were rules.
Oh, yeah.
There was chaos or just going into people's neighborhoods and causing destruction. There were rules to the. Please explain that.
Yeah, you wouldn't go in somebody's neighborhood and shoot a woman or hurt a child. Because if you did that, you came back to your neighborhood and you got chastised for something like that. If you were to hurt a woman or a child in anybody's neighborhood, you got chastised in your neighborhood for doing something like that. So for the most part, we were protected. But well, anyway, when we had a gang war, one person would have to declare the gang war that was from that gang. Well, we had a meeting we would have if that person wanted a gang war against another corner. We would the leader of the gang would have to declare that, or the warlord actually would have to declare that gang war. And at one point, I was a warlord in my.
So your warlord, what is that like? Is it like y'all had lieutenants and?
Yeah, we actually had a warlord. We had the second runner and we had the first runner. It would basically be three leaders in the gang. It was the warlord, the first runner, and the second runner. When the first office I held was warlord of my gang, I started out a squidget. You had the squidgets, the midgets, the juniors, the seniors, and the old heads. So you had 5 levels of your military. So I was a warlord of my squidgets. When I got to be a midget, I was a second runner. And before I became a junior, we actually mostly stopped when I was a junior. I was a runner. So I ran the 3 parts of my my gang. And it's not because I was bad or anything like that. I didn't know how to hold my hands, but I figured out a long time ago, the guys who wanted to be known to be bad guys, I would put them up to fight, because you want to be a bad guy, you go ahead, you run and you charge, So I was able to, I found out by being a runner, I didn't have to fight as much. Only I had to fight, and this is what we would do before we would complete our gang war, is both gangs would come together, one on one side of the street and one on the other, and we would choose which person we wanted to fight. And we would have to fight them barehanded, bare knuckle, fight, win, lose, or draw. It was over. If anybody took it further than that, they got chastised by their gang. We used to we call it kangaroo court. If you did something wrong within your gang, you had to go through kangaroo court. We would line up, and you would have to go through that line, and we would hit you, kick you, and everything else. And once you get through that line, you would have.
That's how Black people do in our families. We take care of what we used to take care of, what we're supposed to take care of within our own communities. If you got to take you in the basement, like he said, beat you up in the basement, you go on and get yourself together. Or like he said, kangaroo court. Exactly. You're gonna go down that line.
Oh yeah, wrong. You're going to. We had a way of we had a system, and it really worked. The women in the neighborhood didn't walk around afraid like they do today.
Well, I know one woman that didn't walk around afraid, your sister. And why wouldn't she walk around afraid when y'all was gang war? Jeanette.
Oh, my sister. Well, some gangs had their little girl gangs, and my sister, she was something. They had a gang called the Greencoats. The Greencoats was from North Street, my segment again. And there was other gangs, they had their girls was Diamond Street and whatnot. And the green coats, they would have these long length green coats with hoods on them, and they would carry our guns for us. And when we shoot our guns, we give them to the girls, and the girls were walking down the street. So when the police come, we didn't have any guns. The girls would have them, and they would just walk on the way. When we gang war, very seldom did somebody get killed. And if they got killed, it really wasn't meant to be like that. Because we would shoot sawed-off shotguns, okay? meaning that we would saw the barrel off so it would be a scatter gun. And if somebody got shot, they got shot with pellets. And, you know, and that has happened from time to time. But every now and then somebody would die. If somebody died from a corner, that would be a lifetime gang war. Like North Street and the Valley had a lifelong gang war because somewhere down back in the day, the guy from North Street killed this guy from the Valley, and so there was a rival gang. I mean, there were times and periods where they didn't fight, but they could always continue to fight because it was a rival kind of thing.
Yeah.
It happened once in a lifetime. You know, if you had a rival gang and somebody got killed, you would hear, oh, well, that happened back when the old heads was midgets, you know.
Okay, it was that, yeah.
Yeah, one of them kind of things, you know. So, you know, it was considered violence or whatever, but it was organized. The police kind of, they kind of understood that and got wind of it, and then they broke up the gangs. One way that they broke up the gangs was with drugs. The drug era came, and
hold on, before you get to the drug era, yeah, because that's very interesting. You spoke about sometimes there were men in the community, sometimes it was two-parent homes, but they weren't supposed to be two-parent, but it was two people in the home. Sometimes it was single women. It was clean. You kept the neighborhood clean because people didn't throw trash. And this is in the projects. I grew up, I was down there, my grandma lived down there, and this is how it was when I was there. And I'm young still, a little bit young. Y'all were respectful of your elders. You didn't bring any gang violence into your own neighborhoods. Y'all took it outside of the neighborhoods. You protected the women and the children within the neighborhoods. And this is prior to the drug era. What year would they have been when, and you're speaking about crack, or which drug?
No, we're speaking about, see, at first,
you're not speaking about crack was later. What are you talking about?
Well, I'm talking about what I experienced first. During the time I was from the gang and everything, we drank wine. I drank plenty of wine. You know, that was the most that we've done. And when you got close to, say, around 1968, somewhere around that area, then people started experimenting with marijuana. Well, marijuana wasn't something that kind of broke up our neighborhood. As a matter of fact, marijuana started bringing people together because—
Dad, before you start that, I do apologize because you said 1968, and I don't know my dates that well, but there are a lot of things. I still want to talk about your childhood because you have lived within a period where a lot of things happened. You had the moon, but I mean, you had communism, and you had was it communism? Yeah, communism, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, John F. Kennedy. So before we go over that, would you tell us how old were you, or around what age were you when you experienced like those drills that were in schools that saying that they're going to kill you and the bombs, the world is over? How was that? How did you feel about, what did you know about Martin Luther King? How did you feel at the time when he was killed? Same thing with Malcolm X, and you know, everybody beloved white person for Black people, John F. Kennedy. He was all right person. His family kind of cool. But go ahead.
Well, my first memory of assassination, I'll put it that way, was John F. Kennedy. I remember I was in junior high school. I remember the day that he got assassinated because I was in school. I was in junior high school, I believe the 7th grade. And when they killed him, we left school and all of that. But before then, you talk about fearing the communists and things like that. I remember when John F. Kennedy, during the Bay of Pigs, during that time, everybody was really tense because, and even my mother, she would tell, I don't know what's going to happen. I think there's going to be a nuclear war. And we're going to die, you know, so we was expecting, you know, that's just one of the fears that I live with throughout my life. And I live with fears all of my life, one fear or another. But that was something, a fear that I felt on a broad level. Everybody kind of felt that. Then when they killed John F. Kennedy, it was another, it was fear mixed with sorrow and mourning for his death. When they killed Martin Luther King, see, back then, when Martin Luther King was marching and there was a lot of protesting and stuff like that, I experienced, in Philadelphia, there was
and we live in Philadelphia, which is the North. And people think Philadelphia, the North, is not racist. Pennsylvania has the most KKK chapters in all of the country, even the South.
Pennsylvania is really the most racist. It's the most racist. They have the most racist organizations in the country.
And Philadelphia is quite racist.
In Pennsylvania.
In Philadelphia alone, even Philadelphia is the majority Black people, even though the census say it's half, it's 49% or 48%. Those other white people ain't white. A lot of them darker than me, a lot of them are foreigners, a lot of them are Latinos. So Philadelphia is predominantly Black. However, it is very, very racist here, even to this day. 2 years ago, a Black man who didn't even live here committed suicide in a white park by hanging himself, as if we commit suicide by hanging ourselves in odd places. So Philadelphia is still pretty racist. It's just because it's in the North doesn't mean it's anything. And this is when my father was younger. This is back in the 60s, 50s and 60s.
Yeah, we had a mayor called Frank Rizzo. He was police commissioner at the time. To show you some of the stuff that we went through, I went to Thomas Edison. I was going to Thomas Edison High School at that particular time. And a little side tidbit to that was more young men died in the Vietnam War that went to Thomas Edison than any other high school in the country.
Wow.
At the same time, Kensington was Naya's mother went to Kensington, was our sister school. That school was set in it was in the middle, surrounded by a white neighborhood.
Yes, and it's still white and dirty now. It's good. If you go on the internet, KNA is dirty,
it's
drug addict, PWT.
But this was down in Jewtown. This was it's partially KNA and all of that stuff together. If you went down there now, it's the worst part of Philadelphia.
Worst part, disgusting. And it wasn't that great when I was younger either. It was dirty then.
Yeah. Well, anyway, they threatened young Black girls and told them if they came out of school, they were going to sick their dogs on them and beat them.
And this was the police, right?
No, these were people in the neighborhood, right?
These people in the neighborhood.
So we got wind of it at Thomas Edison, and we decided we were going to leave school, go down to Kensington, and get the girls out safely. Marched down to Kensington peacefully, with a peaceful march down to Kensington, and we chanted that Kensington, can you come out to play? I'll never forget it. And that's when, the people in the neighborhood, they didn't do anything because we were there.
And they're cowards. That's what usually happens.
They cowered at the sight of us coming down there, but they were so brave to not. They want to do something to these young girls, Black girls,
cowards.
But they didn't do anything. Well, I give Benjamin Franklin, they helped us out because they came down with us, and unity that we had then was I loved it. But anyway,
and this is my dad is speaking about unity as high schoolers. Black people unity as any age, young now and older. They won't do nothing because they're cowards. They like to pick on people individually, but if we come together, they can't do anything because they're cowards. Remember that. Go ahead.
Well, anyway, we left when on our way leaving. Well, we was coming back. Yeah, we were coming back, and Frank Rizzo, he was the police commissioner, and he got all the police together, and and they actually sick German Shepherd dogs on us.
On children.
Peaceful. We were peaceful. We were doing something very peaceful,
and you were children.
And we were children. We weren't. We were high school children age. So, you know, I've experienced racism. I mean, I believe even to the day, some of our people experience racism. I don't believe racism will ever go anywhere.
Oh, it did. I was just at that job, and the lady, they let me go from that job because the white lady said she's not smiling enough. I don't think if she smiled more, it would be more comfortable.
Yeah, well, you know, you have to have that happy, excuse my
watermelon smile,
nigga image for them to feel safe. Because one thing I found out about violence is mostly violence begin with fear.
Fear.
I really believe that that's where all of their violence comes from. It comes out of fear. They're actually afraid of us, you know.
And it's their nature too. I just like to knock it to a lion is a lion. White people are white people. You're not going to change a lion into an elephant, and you ain't going to change white people into civilized. Let them be.
Well, what it is if white people change, they have to change themselves. We can't change them.
And we shouldn't be upset with them for being who they are. Once we stop being upset with them and let them be, then we'll move on with our lives and continue to be prosperous.
Well, why would you depend on your enemy or somebody who hates you for your livelihood? Why would you depend on?
Not smart at all.
You know, to give you, and that's what we need to learn is nobody gives you anything, and you're definitely not going to get it from people who hate
you. Who don't like you.
If you do get it from them, they're giving it to you for a reason.
Yeah. Oh. There's always a little string. There's always a string or a carrot. Just keep pushing further. But whatever, people do what they want to do. So back to you. Back to you in school.
Nobody ever got anything, ever became anything in this world, got it by somebody giving it to them. They actually took it.
Yes. Because it's yours.
And they didn't expect somebody to give it to them.
Yep. Because what's yours is yours and what's somebody else is theirs. And you shouldn't want somebody else's.
You don't want somebody else, you want what's yours.
Yeah. So you went to
So
you went to, in grade school, you went to, what grade school did you go to?
I went to Ferguson. I mentioned that.
Ferguson. Oh, okay.
Yeah. At Franklin and Norris.
Okay. So and then you went to Wanamaker's.
I went to John Wanamaker.
John Wanamaker's is no longer there, but it used to, I know people my age who went to John Wanamaker's, but it's where Temple University is now. But John Wanamaker's. Then you went to Edison.
I went to Ben Franklin first.
Did you get kicked out?
I went to Ben Franklin for my first year. My first day at Ben Franklin, it was a shootout in the school. And then the game started shooting at each other. So I remember ducking under a water fountain so the gang war started in the school and somebody was shooting and that was my first day. So I made up my mind that wasn't a place I was going to go at.
You said, I don't like this school.
I didn't like that. So I got a work roster, and a work roster is one of the rosters. I guess you're supposed to know it. You get a roster when you go to work half the day, you go to school half the day, and then you go to work half the day. Mm-hmm. I got a work roster. I would go to work the whole day instead of, my mother, she never understood why I never wanted to go to school, but school, I had to fight my way. Even in junior high school, I had to fight because there was a gang that was in the neighborhood of my junior high school. I had to fight to school and fight my way back from school. If I
ain't doing this,
I had to fight, So it was, to go to school, it was like,
You had to go through neighborhoods to get there, and those.
Yeah. So going to school, and they didn't.
Didn't you tell me one time? I thought you said you went to Franklin, but my Uncle William went to Franklin, and you said you used to hang out there.
Yeah, well, I went to Ben Franklin that first year.
Okay, and he was at Ben Franklin.
Your uncle was going there that year too.
Oh, okay.
So, and I remember when we went there, when you went the first day, if you wasn't going to be a punk, you had to go up on the roof and box them guys. You had to show that you wasn't going to be no nerd, or what they call nerds now, but we call them punks then. And so I had to go up on the roof and fight these guys. But anyway, I met some guys from that neighborhood, which was Poplar Street, that went to their school. They were predominant. So I had to hook up with somebody that had some power, I hooked up with them guys, and I started hanging with them. And, and I worked with a couple of them guys that worked on the job that I worked. So I started hanging out with them along. So you could hang out. Well, I would hang out with different gangs, and I was from North Street, but I would hang anywhere I wanted to. I was the type of guy, me and a few of my friends, we went where we wanted, when we wanted, and we made friends where we were, because we were diplomatic, we weren't tough guys.
Yeah, so the friends he's talking about, can you talk about some of the friends you're talking about? I have an Uncle Roscoe, may he rest in peace. Yeah. That was one of my father's first friends in the project.
Me and Roscoe became friends when they was about 3 years old.
We like this years.
Crawled out the house.
My Uncle Norman, my Ruthie, like all of them. He met my mother when they were younger and got married and had some children and stuff. Product. So
it's so funny how that happened, because when your mother first moved in our neighborhood, she was on the balcony. Your Uncle Dennis, right? Man, him.
Yeah, my Uncle Dennis, he got a big old head, big old afro.
we bouncing the ball, going to play some basketball or something. And he looked up at your mother and looked at me. He said, "You're going to marry her." And we was only about 12, 13 years old. Well, I smacked him in the head and told him, "Come on, let's go play the basketball." I don't know what you're talking about. I wasn't thinking about her. But lo and behold, all these years went by. When we got to be 19, we actually got married.
Yeah, they married my mama, my beautiful mama.
Yeah, that was my love of my life at the time. Mm-hmm. She's gone now, God rest her soul, but we have some beautiful children as a result.
Look at me. Look at all this gorgeousness right here. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Well, she thinks she's more top-notch of all of them, but
So, all right. We talked about a little bit. We talked about that. Let's talk about you in because I'm going to have you on here again. We already spoke for an hour and a half almost. And I want to talk about your life as later on. We'll talk about your life as a barber, your profession, and everything like that. Let's talk about. Well, he is my daddy. I have siblings. I have an older sister, his first child, Tyrese. Yeah, I have a brother named Tafiq, named after him. Me.
And then there's her.
And then I have a younger sister named Saida, as we mentioned before. Yeah. He named her after Saida from John Coltrane.
One of my Islamic sisters. Yeah, and I'm proud of all of my children, because they, because I always raised my children to be independent minded and, to sort of go their own way in life and not be a follower, lead their own life. And that's what they did. They're all different, but I'm proud of all of them. My son, I'm proud of him. He has his businesses. He goes to school. He does everything. I'm proud of Tyrese. She's in her job. She does very well.
Man, my sister is very, very smart.
She's very smart. She got the brains from her mother, man, because her mother was a school.
Oh, my mother is brilliant.
And Naya, this one here, she dances to the beat of her own drum. She does her own thing, and I'm really proud of her for that, because I respect anybody who commands their own life. You know, however it may be, how different it may be. I don't think we all supposed to be the same. We're supposed to be different. God, every person that God made is different, and we should learn to get together, love each other with our differences.
See, that's my dad way telling people that I'm strange and a little weird, and
yeah,
gotta love me anyway.
Weird. But you know, my story, I have a lot of ins and outs and a lot of crazy.
My little sister Saida, she looks just like my dad. I'm the only one that don't look like them. I look like his grandparents and stuff.
Saida, she's the sweetest little girl.
She's just so sweet and so beautiful. She's beautiful.
She's another one. She has her own mind. She goes her own way. She has 2 children. They're beautiful children. All of my every one of my children have 2 children except my son. He don't have any. I don't.
His uncle.
He seemed like he.
You know, Artrice keeps saying he got a baby.
he got one somewhere. But
already. But okay, just to close up on your childhood or your youth, we want to talk about a little bit more youth with your friends that you developed when we talk about that later with your older years. But what was your relationship with your siblings? How many siblings do you have? What is your relationship with them?
I have, it's 7 of us actually, because my mother had a first set of children, which was 4, and I was the youngest for about 9 years, and then my mother had another 3 children after me. So I have 3 in front of me, 3 behind me, stuck right in the middle. Well, anyway, I have older sister, Jamila, her name is Pat. Pat, she lives in Georgia here with me.
And her and my sister has the same birthday.
Her and my oldest daughter have the same birthday.
That's how much he loved her so much.
But they're different in some ways.
He said, I'm going to have me a baby on your birthday, sister, because I love you so much. That's what he did. That's what you said. You said, we want to have a baby on your birthday, big sister.
And it just happened that way. I didn't say anything.
It's good. I'm Pat, if you ever watch this, he said he dedicated that baby to you. Now go ahead.
Yeah. Well, anyway, she got her story, I got mine. But anyway, what was I going to say? Oh, my sister Selima, the one is the Jeanette. They stayed in trouble all the time. My sister, I love her dearly. She's still around. What's trouble is she's the scariest. She's scared of everything.
But they say the scary, quiet people, the ones you gotta watch out for.
Yeah. And
she was the one who was the green coat who used to carry
the guns. She was the one with the green coat that used to carry the guns for us when we were coming up. Then I have who is it? My sister Fatima Charlotte. She passed a few years ago. She was a good girl. She was she was one of the good girls of our family.
My Aunt Fox.
The only one, Aunt Fox.
Oh yeah, because when we get to the set, I'm Pam.
Well, then you got the second set.
I'm sorry.
Was Pam. Look, she was born 9 years after me. And what was he saying?
I was saying, sorry, Aunt Angie, if you ever watch this. I'm sorry I skipped over you when he said the good girls, but you know how he is.
Yeah, but Angie, you ain't gonna, Angie don't make no bones about. That's what I like about Angie. Angie is Angie.
Mm-hmm.
She passed a few years ago with Pam. She was another good girl. She had 2 beautiful children. And then I have my brother Greg. He's another one that lives his own life. Greg is my brother Greg. He does.
I don't even think it's a beat that he walks to. He just walks.
Yeah, he
It's no beat.
The beat that he walked to, but he
walks.
And he could only walk that way. Only he could do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I love my brother dearly.
He's the sweetest person. My uncle's sweet.
Huh?
I said my uncle's the sweetest person.
Oh yeah. He gives the shirt off his back, but he'll back.
What he gonna take?
He'll take it back along with your shirt.
In your house.
in your house and everything. So, but that's very good.
But how was your relationship growing up?
How was our relationship?
Since you were the baby for a while, you were the baby, and then you.
Oh, I was the youngest, but my sisters used to give me a hard time. They, they beat me up and everything when I was little. They just took advantage of me because my mother, she didn't allow me to fight them.
Because you're a boy.
A boy, men don't hit on women, so I wasn't allowed. But I had to warm them behind at one good time to let them know when that once I got a certain age, all of that ended because they knew they could.
But did it end when somebody tried to stab you with a spear? Who tried to stab you with a spear?
Oh, my sister Angie. That's.
Oh, but somebody did stab you though, right?
No. She didn't. My sister Fox, the one over me, she stabbed me with a fork.
Yeah, just say he got stabbed.
Still have the marks on me. She could have killed me, but that was Fox. She was the good girl, but she would hurt you. You didn't cross her. We were fighting over the iron when I was little. I took the ironing board from her and was ironing my shirt to go to school with something. And she got mad and stabbed me with a fork. And then my mother beat my behind for hitting her. But anyway, my sister, guess what? She could kill me, but you better not put your hands on me because you put your hand on me, you had to deal with her. She could do whatever she wanted to me though. But anyway, my sister Jeanette, she would stay in trouble all the time, and she would use me to climb out the window to run, to run the street and climb back in the window. I would leave the window open for her, that kind of thing. She would, and my mother would beat her butt all the time. Me and my sister would get all the beatings.
I was telling someone why I did this. I did tell someone this. My aunt, she's famous too. She was the first Black woman to integrate an all-girls reformatory school.
Yeah, Jeanette. She's
the first Black.
She went to what was it, Marymount?
Marymount. She was the first Black to integrate.
They wanted to they experiment with a Black girl to send her up there before they started sending Black girls up there on a regular to see if that worked out. And so she was the first one to go to Marymount. And my sister was incarcerated maybe about 3 times in her life. But
wonderful person.
She's a good person, but
wonderful person, the bestest person. So
she just did her thing,
Told you she was the first. We got a lot of Black history in my family. First Black woman to integrate a reformatory school here in Pennsylvania. I'm proud of my family. Yeah,
well, it's a lot of firsts there. I'd rather save some of the rest of this for the.
All right, well, wait a minute. Just finish with your sisters. Angie tried to stab my dad with a spear.
Oh, yeah. So Angie because I was a few years older than Angie, and Angie she did something, and I smacked Angie. You
don't smack my aunt Angie.
I smacked her. She went and got a knife or something out the drawer to stab me with. And I had a spear in the corner. So I took the spear and put it down at her and charged. And she dropped the knife and said, he's crazy, he's going to kill me. So I had no more trouble out of Angie. And Angie, she's a fighting, that girl.
My aunt is a scrapper.
She beat 3 girls up at one time.
And my aunt little.
She's little and she's a scrapper.
Strong.
To do something really, she would have stuck me with that knife.
Yeah, she would have gutted you.
Stuck with the other sister. I wasn't going to get stuck no more. So, but I scared her out of killing me. She probably killed. She would have tried anyway.
If she would have tried, she wouldn't have stopped. She would have did something.
She would have kept on until something, So I had to scare her. once my other sister stabbed me, she saw the blood, so she, you know, she didn't really.
She didn't mean, you just made her mad, and she didn't mean. I stabbed somebody before. I didn't mean to stab her.
She was like, if you catch her up in the moment, she'll hurt you. Mm-hmm. But and Pat was always quiet. Pat was always the odd one in the family. When we were doing one thing, she's doing something else. You know, she was the pritzy one. She was the what you call today bougie. She was the bougie family. Yeah. You know, and so I guess that covers all of them.
Yeah, and my Uncle Greg lives down there, and my dad is in Georgia.
He lives in Georgia also.
He lives in Georgia. And they frequently see each other, so that's good. They get to spend time.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I was supposed to see him today, but
he'll call you later.
Yeah, he'll call me.
Well, this is my daddy and my daddy, Tafi Kadri. We will be doing a part 2 because he has such a rich life, and I enjoyed this. Did you enjoy yourself, Dad?
Yeah. I mean, talking about things and going back, it's so much more, even in segment of things that happened and things I could tell you about that makes me who I am. And also, not only that makes me who I am, that makes a lot of Black men the way that they are, the things that they tend to have experienced in life and continue to experience. And it's the reason that we are the way that we are. You know, there's a reason, and I think it's time for us to start taking our life in our own hands.
Yes.
We've been allowing someone else to define who we are. You know, we're so much more and so different than what we portrayed to be.
What we were told we are, or the definition.
Yeah, I said we have to redefine ourselves, because a lot of us believe we're this way ourselves when we're really not. Give an example, just the way that we were given religion. They first tell you that you were a wretch.
Sinner, a wretched sinner. You was born in sin. How would you feel about yourself if you knew you was just that dirty and wretched?
If you start out that dirty, how can you inspire to be anything greater?
And that's what we look at.
God made us.
Yeah, we're looking at it in the eyes of somebody else's culture. That may be true for somebody else's culture, but that has no bearing on us. We are born in grace. We are born in godliness. Like I said on here before, when I was born, my father, he whispered in my ear, Allahu Akbar, means God is the greatest. And he reminded me that I'm a God every day. So when you're born with that knowing of who you are, you live and walk and move a certain way. So if he whispered in my ear that you the devil, at my first hearing of any voices, and each day I was told that I am wretched, I am sinful, what more would I do but go out and sin more? Or I wouldn't feel any kind of ways about sinning if that's who I know I am. I feel some kind of way when I do something bad because I was born into godliness. So I can't do something and then feel as though that is something I should do because I'm wretched. Now I was born into godliness, so I should feel a way about doing things ungodly.
Well, that's why I'm proud of my daughter, because, you know, and reiterate, we need to redefine ourselves religiously, spiritually, economically. We need a complete makeover as a people, because we aren't what we were told we are. We are so much greater than that. And it should be obvious to us, that's what they're afraid of. We're afraid for us to find out who we are. Because once the world finds out who we are, if we find out who we are, and we begin to be ourselves, not what somebody else told us we were, but to be ourselves. And once we learn that and we can change this whole world. We can make this whole world better. It has nothing to do with anybody else. It has nothing to do with the white man or this man or that man. It all has to do with us. We start minding our own business.
Yes.
Into our business and leave other people's business alone. That's their reality.
And it works for them.
We don't all have the same reality.
They shouldn't have to change their reality for us either, because that's how their reality is. And it works for them. We don't know if them being like us will mess up their whole reality. Let people be who they want to be.
Who they are.
We don't need to be doing it, because that's not our reality. And we see it with our eyes. We know with how we are with each other. It doesn't match up with what they tell us who we are. It never has. Uncivilized, we're the most civilized, clean, loving, kind, forgiving as people. How can we be beastly and uncivilized if we're the kindest and most lovingest people that's walking on this earth?
And trust where we trust everybody.
We trust everybody. So how can we be so uncivilized and beastly and evil if even up to now, we show nothing but love and kindness and forgiveness?
And
it doesn't match up.
Once we take them attributes and start living by them, we will start living better. We will more honor and respect for one another. And we need to have. It ain't about respecting somebody else. It's about respecting yourself. If you yourself, you'll respect everybody. Because
if you disrespect someone, it has to come from somewhere. It means you have to have disrespect inside of you to be disrespectful. If you're respectful, that means you're full of respect. Now you can be disrespectful, but you can't mistakenly and say that other person disrespected you. No, you were full of disrespect because you was able to give it.
That's right. And if that's exactly right. That's why they call you disrespectful, because you full of disrespect. So you're going to disrespect others. If you respect yourself, you can fill yourself up with respect. You fill yourself up with respect, you will respect others.
You have no other choice. Yeah. So this is us closing out for the part 1. Part 2, we'll finish up later.
And that'll probably be the most interesting.
And we might have a part 3 and a part 4, because even the part 2, we got to cut off at a certain age, and then there's some more.
Yeah, it goes on and on.
Love you, Daddy.
Love you too, baby.
Spending this time with me.
Oh yeah.
We want to finish this up a little later. Bye, Daddy. Cut it off. Now you know how to cut. I'll call you. Bye.
Call me.